In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in a small community called Brethenheth with about 400 residents, an 18-year-old girl named Linda Stoltzfus lived with her parents and 9 siblings. This community belonged to the Old Order Amish, known for their traditional way of life. The Amish are peaceful and kind people who lead a simple lifestyle. Women in their community are not allowed to cut their hair, while men, on the contrary, must grow beards. Their clothing is also plain, without buttons or zippers. This religious group rejects the use of modern technologies such as electricity, phones, and cars. From an early age, the Amish teach their children to work hard and they themselves put in a lot of effort. Typically, Amish communities are located in small provincial towns where they engage in agriculture and have large families. Linda's father worked as a carpenter, and her mother was a homemaker who took care of the house and children. Due to the prohibition on using modern technology, the children did not have mobile phones or social media profiles. That's why there were very few photos of Linda. On June 21, 2020, Father's Day, a tragic event occurred. Linda disappeared. It happened during the day when the girl was returning home from church. The service ended around noon, and Linda set off alone to go home, change clothes, and grab a pie before returning to the church for an important meeting. Her parents were waiting for her at the church, but she never showed up. Concerned, the parents decided to go home to find Linda, but she was not there, nor were the clothes she had been wearing. The pie she had intended to take with her remained on the table, indicating that she had not made it home. The family and other community members began searching for the girl, combing the area along the road she would have taken to get home, but to no avail. Eventually, they were forced to seek help from the police. The police immediately got to work and organized a massive search for the missing girl. In addition to volunteers, police officers, the FBI, dog handlers with service dogs, drones, mounted police, and ATV units were involved in the search. Despite the fact that a total of 338 people participated in the search efforts, no trace of Linda was found. To encourage people to provide information about the girl's whereabouts, a reward of $10,000 was announced. While the search operations were ongoing, investigators went to the church to question parishioners who had seen Linda on the day of her disappearance. Witnesses said that on that day, the girl was dressed in her usual church attire, a light brown dress, a white apron, and a dark headscarf. She was in good spirits, as always. Linda walked home barefoot, carrying her shoes in her hands. Her parents assumed that their daughter was walking home by her usual route, as there was only one main road leading to their house, which was the shortest path. They doubted that Linda would have taken any detours. Moreover, their county had always been considered a quiet and safe place with a very low crime rate. That's why the police initially considered the version that the girl might have run away from home as the main one. It was assumed that Linda, perhaps tired of the traditional Amish life with its strict limitations, had decided to flee in search of a freer life. However, when investigators questioned the missing girl's friends and acquaintances, they all unanimously stated that Linda was completely happy. She liked living according to the rules of their community, loved her family, was always in a good mood, and helped teach children at the local school. In addition, Linda had several trips planned that she was looking forward to. The girl was on excellent terms with everyone. Therefore, she had no compelling reasons to run away, so everyone was convinced that she would never have taken such a step. Dismissing the runaway theory, investigators focused on the likelihood of the girl being abducted. They began searching for potential witnesses and reviewing surveillance camera footage in the area to try to track her movements. 2 weeks later, on July 8, 2020, detectives managed to find a witness who lived near Linda's supposed route. The man said that on that day, around 12:30 p.m., while he was sitting on the porch of his house, a red sedan drove past him. This car caught his attention due to the driver's strange behavior. First, the car passed the witness's house, then turned around, stopped for a minute, and then drove past the witness again in the direction of the church. The man noticed that there were 2 people in the car, the driver with dark hair, and someone in the passenger seat whom the witness could not make out. It turned out that this was not a random car in those parts. The day before Linda's disappearance, a group of 20 Amish girls walking along the road had seen the same car drive past them 3 times at a very slow speed. The girls remembered the car, and described the driver as a dark-skinned man with curly dark hair. He acted as if he was looking for something, and looked at the girls with such a creepy gaze that it made them uncomfortable. Another woman was also found who had encountered the red car. According to her, the car passed her 4 times, and the driver carefully examined her. The frightened woman ran to local fishermen who were nearby, after which the suspicious driver immediately disappeared. Investigators speculated that the unknown man was looking for a convenient victim, but did not dare to attack a whole group of girls or a woman in the presence of witnesses. Police found several surveillance cameras in the area that could have captured Linda, and seized the recordings for detailed examination. After a long and painstaking work, they managed to find the necessary fragment. The video captured the same red car that the witness had mentioned. It was a vehicle similar to a Chevrolet model. The car had several distinctive features. There was a spoiler on the trunk, some damage or stickers were visible. Although it was not possible to clearly see who exactly was inside the cabin on the recording, a white spot was visible on the passenger seat, the nature of which the police could not understand. Thanks to the license plate number, detectives were able to identify the car's owner. It turned out to be a 35-year-old man named Justo Robert Smoker. Law enforcement officers carefully studied all available information about him. It was discovered that Justo was born in 1985 in Costa Rica into a very poor family. His biological parents could leave the children alone for weeks at a time. To feed himself, his brother, and sister, the boy was forced to steal. Later, the children were taken away from their negligent parents and placed in a shelter, where Justo suffered both physical and sexual. When the boy turned 7, he was adopted by another family along with his brother and sister. The adoptive parents treated the children with kindness, so it seemed that a better life awaited Justo. He did well in school, was fond of football and wrestling. However, in his teenage years, he began using banned substances and resorted to theft again. The boy was repeatedly arrested but released each time due to his minor age. The first serious punishment caught up with Justo in 2006 when he turned 21. He was sentenced to imprisonment for a term of 12.5 to 30 years for robbery. However, he served only half of the term behind bars. His brother was released in 2016, and Justo himself in 2019. Justo's early release from prison a year before Linda's disappearance had tragic consequences. At the time of the incident, the man was working at a factory located 15 kilometers from the Amish community in Brethenheth. The police went there to inspect his car, which was parked in the factory parking lot. Justo's vehicle completely matched the one that was captured on the surveillance cameras. In particular, it had the same spoiler, damage, and stickers. The detectives decided to follow the suspect. Waiting for the end of his work shift, the police discreetly followed Justo. The man arrived at his house, which was located 10 kilometers from the factory. Investigators visited him to talk about Linda's disappearance. Justo denied being acquainted with the girl or ever seeing her. He claimed that he was not in that area at all on that day. However, the detectives knew this was not true, as his car had been recorded by surveillance cameras. At that point, the police did not have enough evidence to charge Justo, but he was already considered the main suspect. Investigators tracked his phone calls and found out that on the day of Linda's disappearance, around noon, the man was in the area where she vanished. He was also seen there on June 20th when a group of Amish girls walked past him. It was him. Police investigated information about the suspect's banking transactions and discovered that on those days he was buying a lot of alcoholic beverages. It seemed that the man was drinking alcohol and driving around the county in search of a convenient victim. In addition, on the morning of June 21st, the day Linda disappeared, at 9:30 a.m., he purchased 2 pairs of latex gloves and 3 pairs of shoelaces at Walmart. Investigators suspected that Justo was a real predator who was hunting specifically for Amish girls, considering them easy prey. In that area, there were practically no surveillance cameras, the population was small, and the girls were defenseless and unable to fight back. Detectives continued to study recordings from other cameras, trying to track the route of the red Chevrolet. After long and painstaking searches, investigators finally came across a recording that captured the moment of the girls' abduction. The video showed a red car moving along the road behind a pedestrian, presumably Linda. Suddenly, the car pulled over to the side of the road, the driver got out of the cabin, crossed the road, and approached the girl. The man pulled something white over her head, resembling a bag, after which they both headed to the car. The time on the recording showed 12:41. While studying the surveillance camera recordings located near the school, police noticed the same red Chevrolet, which had two people inside. The car entered the school parking lot and disappeared from the camera's view. However, just 5 minutes later, the car drove back onto the road and headed away. Later, eyewitnesses were found who saw this car near the school around 1:30 p.m. that same day. They turned out to be an Amish couple. A woman named Sarah said that she noticed a girl from their community sitting in the passenger seat, dressed in a brown dress, a white apron, and a dark headscarf. However, Sarah could not make out the passenger's face. She also noted that there was no longer anything white on the girl's head. Sarah waved at her, but the girl did not react in any way, which seemed strange and rude to the woman, since the Amish usually travel in horse-drawn carriages, not in cars. Investigators speculated that Justo had specifically driven into the school parking lot to remove the white bag from the girl's head and calm her down a bit before continuing on his way. Later, other witnesses were found who had seen a red car that day with a girl from their community, dressed in traditional clothing, sitting in the passenger seat. They all paid attention to this, since Amish women are not supposed to ride in cars. In addition, while tracking the movements of Justo's phone, detectives noticed one suspicious place. After Linda's disappearance, the man visited a certain building located 5 kilometers from the Amish settlement 7 times. Investigators suspected that these visits were not accidental and that Justo, perhaps, wanted to get rid of the kidnapped girl's body there. Law enforcement officers went to the mentioned place and spoke with the owner of the building. The man said that he had indeed repeatedly seen a red car. It first appeared around 5 p.m. on June 21, and the driver behaved extremely suspiciously. He wandered back and forth, peered into the windows, and then got into the car and drove away. According to the owner of the house, a young dark-skinned man with curly hair was behind the wheel. Later, the car visited this place several more times. Police began to examine the surrounding area and found items of women's clothing, stockings and underwear, buried in the ground. Relatives of the missing girl recognized these items, confirming that they belonged to Linda. However, the girl's body was not found there. Meanwhile, the results of the DNA examination arrived. Justo's genetic material was found on the discovered stockings and underwear. On July 10, the suspect was called in for questioning. At first, he denied being in that area and seeing Linda, but there was strong evidence against him, recordings from surveillance cameras and a DNA match. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, Justo changed his testimony. He stated that he sometimes drove on dirt roads and could have accidentally ended up in those places. The man admitted that he occasionally drank alcohol but insisted that there was never anyone else in the car with him. Justo could not explain how his DNA ended up on the missing girl's belongings, so he was arrested. The suspect was charged with kidnapping and murdering Linda, despite the fact that her body had not yet been found at that time. After analyzing the totality of the evidence, investigators concluded that the girl was most likely already dead. Having obtained a warrant, the police conducted searches in Justo's house and car. The car turned out to be thoroughly washed, and there was a sharp smell of chlorine in the cabin. An empty bottle of bleach was found in the trunk, and the floor was covered with new mats. Nothing was found in the suspect's house that could shed light on this case. Neither the 2 pairs of latex gloves nor the shoelaces that Justo had purchased that morning at Walmart were found there. The police also failed to find the clothes that the man was wearing on the day of Linda's disappearance. Instead, the police found out that after the girl's disappearance, Justo had visited a self-service car wash station. After studying the recordings from the local surveillance cameras, investigators saw that before entering the car wash, the suspect first drove up to the garbage cans and threw something away. Most likely, those were his clothes, because then the man changed into different attire. At that moment, there were no longer any passengers in the car. The car wash employees said that the driver was extremely thorough in cleaning his vehicle, especially the interior, which seemed suspicious to them. The search for Linda's body continued. Particular attention was paid to the area where her underwear was found. And only 10 months after the girl's disappearance, thanks to the testimony of Justo himself, the remains of a human body were discovered behind the railway tracks. It was wrapped in a tarpaulin and wound with adhesive tape. The deceased was dressed, and her hands and feet were tied with ropes. Another rope was tightening the victim's neck, the edges of the apron were wrapped around her face, and her mouth was sealed with tape. Investigators suggested that Justo had initially buried the girl's body along with her stockings, but later returned to the crime scene and moved the remains to another, more secure location behind the tracks. A forensic medical examination established that Linda died from strangulation and also had antemortem knife wounds in the neck area. Traces of blood were found in the victim's vagina, indicating that she was still alive at the time the knife wounds were inflicted. The identity of the deceased was officially recognized. It was the missing Linda Stoltzfus. However, the experts could not definitively establish whether had been committed against her. Nevertheless, the prosecution insisted of the crime, evidence of which was the presence of Justo's DNA on the victim's underwear. Taking this into account, as well as the threat of a possible death sentence, the lawyer advised his client to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. Justo agreed. Ultimately, the defendant pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, kidnapping, rape, and falsification of evidence. The prosecutor and the relatives of the deceased girl agreed to this deal, because it was thanks to Justo's testimony that Linda's body was found, which otherwise would probably never have been discovered. Thus, the victim's relatives were able to bury her properly. The defendant confirmed that he had reburied the remains himself. During the court hearing, the killer offered his apologies both to the family of the deceased and to his adoptive parents, who had supported him throughout the entire process. Members of Linda's family stated that they needed time to cope with the tragedy, but in the end, they planned to forgive the criminal, because this is what their holy scripture teaches them. The court found the accused guilty and sentenced him to imprisonment for a term of 35.5 to 71 years for intentional murder. In addition, for violating the conditions of early release, Justo must serve another 17.5 years in prison. Thus, the maximum term that threatens him is 88 years behind bars, which in his case is actually equivalent to life imprisonment. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.